finally time that we talk about another Christian movie on The Captivating Christian. I know, we haven't had one of these in a very long time. We've had to talk about bad animated rip-off movies and cheap Hollywood blockbusters and the sorts, but now we're finally going back to our roots and talking about a religious movie. In this case, it was a movie based on the Ten Commandments that was released in 2007. Now, I don't know about you, but I am very excited. The Ten Commandments is an animated Christian film released theatrically in 2007. Among the companies that put it together, the two biggest studios of note here are Hugh Studios and Spark Animation, both of which are outside of the US. The only thing of note that I found from their Wikipedia pages is they usually collaborated with other studios to help them complete their animated projects. The two biggest ones of note, of course, being VeggieTales and 321 Penguins. The film had a budget of $10 million, but only came back at the box office with $1 million, meaning the film is labeled as a financial flop and a box office bomb. And do you want to know why that is? No, that's not the reason at all. It's because in America, people like me are the most persecuted group out there. People these days don't want to go to the movie theaters to see good old-fashioned Christian entertainment. And because people don't watch as many Christian movies as I do, that just goes to show that I'm being oppressed. Last bit of note is the voice cast they have on display, with names like Uncle Tamir, Dr. Octagonopus, that one guy from Alone in the Dark.
As well as some very well-known Canadian voice actors, like Scott McNeil, Matt Hill, Kathleen Barr, and Tabitha St. Germain.
Let's see why this movie is an underrated gem. This is the animated Ten Commandments movie from 2007.
It was a time of pharaohs, a time of monuments. It was a time of wealth and a time of slavery.
As the story goes, the Egyptians have enslaved the Hebrews to build their pyramids. Worried that the number of people is growing and that they will rise up and revolt against them, he orders that they be worked even harder. That doesn't seem to work like he wanted, so he commands his guards to round up every newborn male baby and have them thrown into the Nile.
Go out and find every Hebrew baby boy. Throw them all into the Nile. Let the crocodiles have them.
I guess Roland Emmerich forgot that little detail when he was making 10,000 BC. Though he did manage to remember the part about rising up and stopping the pyramids from being built. You know, until the aliens did it for them.
Then these slaves shall know who is Pharaoh, who is their God. They shall fear me. They shall worship me.
Meanwhile, Moses' family discuss how they'll keep their youngest safe by putting him into a basket they made and sending him down the river.
He'll be able to get away. Get away from Pharaoh.
Oh my Celestial, what's wrong with your face?
So they hide the baby inside the basket like they planned. They send the basket down the river, but the sister Miriam can't help but hang back and try to make sure that nothing bad happens to her baby brother. Running animation. It's so terrible. The next day, Moses is found by the Pharaoh's daughter, the princess of Egypt.
This is one of the Hebrews' children. But now he is mine.
Hey, that's the voice of Tabitha St. Germain.
Okay. And?
Well, she is the voice of Rarity on My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, which means that in this movie, Rarity is a princess! Rejoice all Rarity fanboys! Rarity gets to be a princess for realsies, yo!
I have no idea what the heck he is talking about. By the way, we were about 8 minutes into this movie, and they finally got to the opening credits. During said credits, we see Moses and the Pharaoh's son Ramses growing up together, and how Moses was always the favorite child and was better than his brother in every way. Even when they're older, he seems to hold his own in a fight one-on-one against his adoptive brother, or cousin as he calls him in this one.
I didn't mean to get us into trouble, cousin.
And aside from one of them having a slightly darker shade of skin, they both look exactly the same. Anyway, the two get into trouble by damaging a fountain. I'm sorry, I thought it was knocking off the nose of the Sphinx going by the Prince of Egypt. This one incident is enough to leave Ramses peeved, so from this point on, he has a grudge against Moses. Jump forward in time, and Ramses is next in line for the throne, and he plans to make sure Moses never gets the chance to take the power away from him. Over with Moses, he helps an elderly Hebrew slave plant a tree, and much like the original story, he ends up getting into a fight with an Egyptian slaver who was abusing his slaves. The fight ends with the slaver being stabbed to death, and then Aaron shows up and tells Moses that his nurse was his real mother all along. Okay, that part wasn't that quick in the original story. I get trying to speed things up for the sake of a movie's pacing and all, but I'm just saying, that should have had a little more build-up to it. Aaron gives Moses his donkey to flee, but it's ultimately pointless, as Ramses has him thrown out of Egypt. He says that he would have killed him, but his father stepped in and demanded that he just be banished to the desert instead.
There is your scepter. You are now a prince of the desert. Begone from Egypt, Moses. Be the prince of the scorpions.
So that's why they both look like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The donkey smells water nearby and heads off, while Moses follows behind him. They discover a group of women being harassed by some brutes, and they scare them off because he has a donkey with a temper, I guess. Oh, I'm not kidding. That's actually the reason they give in the movie.
I'm a dead man to Pharaoh, and my donkey has a bad temper. So why don't you leave now? Let the women tend to their sheep. The two of us, we have nothing to lose or to fear.
And then Moses passes out after this happens. One of the women, Zipporah, revives him and says that he can live with them in their land of Midian. Time goes by and her father gives her away to Moses after hearing that he saved her. Back in Egypt, the Hebrews are suffering. And if you're familiar with the story, this leads to Moses being contacted by God via the burning bush, which looks like this in this movie, and he tells Moses that he will be the one to lead his people out of Egypt.
Moses. Moses. Moses.
I'm here. I'm right here.
Take off your shoes, for you are standing on holy ground.
So Moses accepts his role as God's prophet and heads back to Egypt. Along the way, he meets up with Aaron once again, and Aaron lets him know about what's happened to their people in his absence. Once they arrive in Egypt, Moses demands to speak with Ramses, who has now taken the throne.
Moses the coward. My sister died mourning you.
I'm sorry.
No!
Oh, what now?
Chris, didn't you see? They killed Beth Pony!
What?
The princess from earlier in the movie who shared Rarity's voice actress, they said that she's dead. No, she's dispelled. They got rid of Beth Pony as princess. No. This is the worst possible thing.
Could you please leave now? Anyway, Moses is given time to speak to Ramses and his people, but like the story goes, he doesn't listen to him, even calling him things like a coward, and a murderer, and a fraud.
You expect me to just let the Hebrews leave? Just like that? Because a god I do not know, have never heard of, wants me to? You've been in the desert too long. Look at you, with your tawdry robe and your splintered staff. You're pathetic in my eyes, but then you've always been pathetic.
Moses shows off God's powers by turning his staff into a snake, but that's not enough to sway Ramses as he brings out his personal magicians who can also conjure snakes. But Moses' snake devours the other snakes whole. I'm sorry, it was actually Aaron's staff in the original story. Didn't know if you knew that, just thought I'd let you know. This enrages Ramses, and he makes things even worse for the Israelites, which leads to God sending the plagues down on the Egyptians, turning their water into blood, lice, frogs, flies, locusts, dying cattle, boils, fire, hail, 3 days of darkness, and the death of the firstborn Egyptians. After all the plagues, the Hebrews are let go, but Ramses is still vengeful and sends his army after them. After we get the most iconic image in the story, the parting of the Red Sea, the Israelites are on the verge of riots since they don't have any food or water once they cross. But God gives them more water and food, and while it is good for a while, they begin to demand meat. They're given even more quail, but it's not good enough to them now. So Moses and his general Joshua must come up with a plan. While the animation in this movie isn't very good, I will give them this. It's still better looking than Joshua in the Promised Land.
One day, a general you will be. God has told me you will do great things for our people.
Really?
God tells me many things.
Well, thank you, Moses. Well, thank you, sir.
While Moses is on the hill listening to God's law, the people grow even more impatient and uneasy. So they instead create a false idol to worship, the golden calf. Now, in the original story, Moses comes down with the stone tablets, breaks them out of anger, and negotiates with God, who is ready to destroy them, but Moses reminds him that they are his chosen people, and they were punished by grounding up the gold and having it put into their drinking water. But in this movie, the earth begins to cave and the people who created the calf are swallowed into the earth's core. Okay, all of that just happened, all the people falling into the center of the earth, that didn't happen in the original story. I mean, come on, with the budget this movie had, they couldn't even be bothered to do just a little bit of research? Anyway, after that, Moses is given new stone tablets for the commandments, and he has the people build the tabernacle to house them inside the Ark of the Covenant. The people grow selfish once again, and Moses has to beg God not to destroy his people. However, as punishment for their behavior, they are sent to wander the desert for 40 years before they can find the Promised Land. Not even Moses' siblings are spared from this.
We really caused Pharaoh some problems. You remember?
Snake.
And those flies. I think the flies were my favorite. Whoa, Pharaoh hated those flies. God has a great sense of humor.
And so the movie ends with an old Moses appointing Joshua their new leader and taking one final look at the Promised Land before he dies. Also, he can take some solace in the fact that this movie was just a little bit better than Joshua and the Promised Land. Wait, I said that at the beginning of the video, didn't I? Darn it! So that was the 2007 Ten Commandments movie, and even though I really wanted to like this movie just based on the fact that it's based on a Bible story that I really like, it's not very good. While the animation is still better than something like Joshua and the Promised Land or Kiara the Brave, it's still not very good looking. The voice actors might be trying, but a lot of the voice acting is very stiff for the most part. And overall, there are just way better reenactments of this story out there, whether it be The Prince of Egypt, or the Charlton Heston movie, or that televised miniseries of the Ten Commandments that came out just a year before this movie did. I don't want to say that I hated this movie or anything, but yeah, compared to other retellings of the Ten Commandments, this is very mediocre at best. And that's coming from me, the guy who gave positive reviews to the Golden Films and Good Times Entertainment retellings of Noah's Ark. Next time on The Captivating Christian, we will be talking about the 1998 comedy starring Eddie Murphy, Holy Man. Oh, I guess we're not. Okay, how about we talk about the 2009 biblical comedy Year One? Oh, okay, how about we do a double feature talking about Bruce Almighty and Evan Almighty? Really? No to that too? Well, darn. What are we talking about then? Why? Let me get this straight. Instead of trying to do something different, I should just talk about another animated movie like I always do. Of course, as always, I'm typecasted as the guy that has to talk about dumb cartoon movies and cheap knockoffs. Because I'm being oppressed!
Moses, has God told you how we are to cross this vast sea?
Not exactly.
I wouldn't let too many people know that.